One winter night, a car was found abandoned on a bridge overlooking the icy waters of the Shark River in New Jersey. The owner of that car was 19-year-old Sarah Stern. At first glance, the scene seemed straightforward. The vehicle was locked. Sarah was gone, and investigators quickly began considering the possibility that she had jumped from the bridge. But there was one problem. As days turned into weeks, divers searched the water, officers followed leads, and volunteers combed the surrounding area. Yet Sarah never appeared. No body, no witnesses, no answers. Then, nearly a year later, detectives obtained a secret recording. And on that recording, a young man casually described how he had supposedly gotten away with murder. What began as a missing person investigation suddenly transformed into one of the most shocking true crime cases in New Jersey history. Because the man speaking wasn't a stranger. He was someone Sarah trusted. Welcome back to BrightDawn's True Crime. Today we're covering the disturbing case of Sarah Stern, a case involving betrayal, greed, and an undercover operation that captured evidence few investigators ever get the chance to hear. Before we begin, please remember that this video is based on publicly available information, court records, and media reports. It is presented for educational and documentary purposes. Viewer discretion is advised. December 2nd, 2016. The Route 35 bridge stretches across the Shark River, connecting communities along the Jersey shore. On most evenings, it's busy but uneventful. That night was different. A vehicle had been left on the bridge. When officers arrived, they identified the owner as Sarah Stern, a local 19-year-old known by friends as creative, independent, and full of plans for the future. But Sarah wasn't inside. The location immediately raised concern. An abandoned vehicle on a bridge often points investigators toward one possibility, and before long, authorities began exploring the theory that Sarah had taken her own life. Search teams were deployed almost immediately. Divers entered the freezing water below. Officers searched the surrounding area. Friends and family desperately hoped Sarah would be found alive. But as the search continued, something felt wrong. The evidence supported a suicide theory. The people who knew Sarah did not. Friends described someone who was talking about the future, making plans and thinking about what came next in life. Nothing seemed to suggest she was preparing to disappear forever. As investigators dug deeper into Sarah's life, they discovered another detail that caught their attention. A rumor. According to several people who knew her, Sarah may have had access to a surprisingly large amount of cash connected to belongings left behind after her mother's death. Nobody knew exactly how much money existed. Some believed the story was exaggerated. Others thought it was completely false. But detectives understood something important. If enough people believed the rumor, then the money itself didn't have to be real. It only had to be believable. Because rumors can create motive. And in Sarah Stern's case, that rumor would eventually lead investigators directly towards someone who had been standing in plain sight from the very beginning. His name was McAtasney. At first, McAtasney seemed like the last person detectives should worry about. He had known Sarah for years. Their families were familiar with one another, and after Sarah disappeared, Liam appeared helpful and cooperative. He spoke with investigators. He spoke with friends. And like everyone else, he claimed to be concerned about Sarah's whereabouts. But as detectives reviewed interviews and gathered statements, Liam's name kept resurfacing. Not because anyone had accused him of a crime, because he seemed unusually interested in one particular topic: the money. According to several witnesses, Liam appeared convinced that Sarah had access to a hidden fortune. While most people dismissed the rumor as speculation, Liam reportedly treated it as fact. For investigators, that detail stood out, because if Sarah really did possess a large amount of cash, someone might have seen her not as a friend, but as an opportunity. As detectives continued examining Sarah's final days, another name entered the picture: Preston Taylor. Like Liam, Preston had known Sarah for years, and like Liam, he was part of the same social circle. At that stage, investigators still lacked enough evidence to make arrests. They couldn't prove a murder had occurred. They couldn't even prove Sarah was dead. Officially, the case remained a missing person investigation. But privately, detectives were beginning to believe something much darker had happened. Then an important lead arrived. Someone informed investigators that Liam had been talking about Sarah's money long before she vanished. Not once, not twice, repeatedly. The information didn't prove guilt, but it provided something investigators had been missing, a possible motive. The challenge now was finding evidence, and that would be far more difficult, because detectives believed that if Liam was involved, he wasn't going to confess during a police interview. So they tried something unusual, an undercover operation. Instead of confronting Liam directly, investigators arranged for an undercover informant to gradually enter his world. The goal wasn't to accuse him. The goal was to listen. Over time, the informant built a relationship with Liam. They spent time together. They talked about life, money, crime, the kind of conversations people have when they believe nobody is listening. Weeks turned into months. The operation moved slowly. Investigators knew patience was critical. Push too hard and Liam might become suspicious. Move too fast and the opportunity could disappear entirely. Then the strategy began paying off. As Liam grew more comfortable around the informant, his conversations became increasingly revealing. At first, the stories sounded like bragging, the sort of exaggerated tales people sometimes tell to impress others. But then specific details started emerging. Details investigators couldn't ignore. One conversation led to another. And before long, Liam was discussing Sarah. Then he was discussing money. Then he was discussing what had happened the night she disappeared. Detectives listening to the recordings could hardly believe what they were hearing, because the person they suspected wasn't denying involvement. He was slowly describing it. The more he talked, the clearer the picture became. According to investigators, Liam had become obsessed with the belief that Sarah possessed a large amount of cash. Eventually, that belief transformed into a plan that required only one thing: getting Sarah alone. And according to what detectives heard on those recordings, he had already figured out exactly how to do it. What came next would become the most disturbing part of the entire investigation, because Liam wasn't describing an accident. He wasn't describing a sudden argument that spiraled out of control. He was describing something far more calculated. And if his account was true, Sarah never realized she was in danger until it was far too late. By the time investigators reviewed the recordings, one thing had become clear. Liam wasn't speaking like someone worried about being caught. He spoke with confidence, almost as if the case had already been solved in his favor. According to prosecutors, Liam described how his fixation on Sarah's supposed money eventually turned into a murder plot. In his mind, the reward justified the risk. And because Sarah trusted him completely, he believed carrying out the plan would be easy. The recordings suggested that on the night Sarah disappeared, she willingly met with Liam. Nothing about the meeting seemed unusual. There was no reason for Sarah to suspect anything was wrong. She wasn't meeting a stranger. She was meeting someone she had known for years, someone she considered a friend. According to the account later presented by investigators, Liam drove Sarah to a secluded area, away from traffic and witnesses. The location offered privacy, exactly what someone would need if they wanted to commit a crime without being seen. At some point, the conversation ended, and violence began. Investigators believe Sarah was caught completely off guard. She never had a chance to defend herself. She never had a chance to escape. And, according to the evidence later presented in court, the attack happened quickly. For detectives, the most disturbing part wasn't just the violence, it was the betrayal. Sarah had willingly gone with someone she trusted. She had no idea she was walking into a trap. As investigators continued listening to the recordings, the details became even more chilling. Liam allegedly described what happened after the killing, how he believed he had successfully hidden the evidence, how he believed police would never discover the truth, and most importantly, how he believed Sarah would never be found. That final detail carried enormous weight, because despite months of searching, Sarah's remains had never been recovered. The missing body had become one of the biggest obstacles facing investigators. Without it, proving murder would be far more difficult. But the recordings changed everything. For the first time, detectives weren't working with theories. They were working with statements made by the man they believed committed the crime. The undercover operation had achieved exactly what investigators hoped. It had captured evidence that could be presented to a jury. Now it was time to act. After months of gathering evidence and building their case, authorities arrested Liam McAtasney. The news sent shockwaves through the community. Many people struggled to reconcile the allegations with the person they thought they knew. Friends remembered someone outgoing and charismatic, not someone accused of murdering a lifelong friend. But investigators weren't finished. Soon afterward, Preston Taylor was also arrested. Authorities alleged that he had helped after the murder and played a role in concealing what had happened. Suddenly, what had started as a missing person investigation became a full-scale murder prosecution. For Sarah's family, the arrests brought mixed emotions. There was relief that investigators had finally identified suspects. But there was also heartbreak, because the arrests confirmed what many had feared from the beginning. Sarah was not coming home. Yet one devastating question remained unanswered. Where was she? Despite the confessions, despite the arrests, and despite the growing mountain of evidence, Sarah's remains had still not been found. That meant her family was forced to endure a painful reality. They knew who was responsible, but they still didn't know where Sarah was, and that uncertainty would continue long after the trial began. As prosecutors prepared their case, they understood they were facing a difficult challenge. The defense would attack the missing body. They would question the recordings. They would argue that boasting is not the same as confession. Everything would now depend on whether a jury believed what they were about to hear. And when the trial finally began, those recordings would become the centerpiece of one of the most remarkable murder cases New Jersey had ever seen. When the trial began, prosecutors faced a problem that would have ended many murder cases before they ever reached a jury. There was no body, no crime scene filled with forensic evidence, no eyewitness who had watched the crime unfold. What they did have was a recording. Hours of conversations secretly captured during the undercover operation. And prosecutors believed those recordings contained something jurors rarely get to hear: the suspect's own words. Over the course of the trial, jurors listened as investigators explained how the undercover operation had been conducted. They heard how the informant gradually gained Liam's trust, how the conversations evolved, and how Liam allegedly began discussing Sarah's disappearance in ways that raised immediate alarm. The prosecution argued that the recordings revealed motive, planning, and knowledge that only the killer could possess. The defense saw things differently. Defense attorneys argued that people often exaggerate when trying to impress others. They suggested that Liam may have been boasting rather than confessing. Just because someone tells a story, they argued, doesn't automatically make the story true. The jury now faced a difficult question. Were the recordings evidence of murder? Or were they simply the reckless fantasies of a young man trying to appear important? As the trial continued, witness after witness took the stand. Investigators described the months-long effort to uncover the truth. Experts explained key elements of the evidence, and Preston Taylor's role in the case became a major focus. By this point, prosecutors had assembled a picture of what they believed happened to Sarah, a picture built from witness testimony, recorded conversations, and the actions of the people involved after she disappeared. For Sarah's family, sitting through the proceedings was agonizing. Every day in court meant hearing details they wished had never existed. Every witness brought them closer to the truth. But that truth came at an emotional cost. Still, they remained there, listening, waiting, hoping that after years of uncertainty, justice would finally arrive. Eventually, both sides presented their final arguments. The prosecution told jurors that the evidence pointed in one direction and one direction only. Sarah Stern had been murdered. The defense urged caution. They reminded jurors that no body had ever been recovered. They argued that reasonable doubt still existed. Then the case was handed to the jury. For Sarah's family, the wait felt endless. Months of investigation, years of grief, and now everything rested on 12 strangers. Finally, the jury reached a decision. The courtroom fell silent. Everyone understood the significance of what was about to happen. The verdict was read: guilty. Liam McAtasney was convicted of murdering Sarah Stern. After years of uncertainty, the person prosecutors identified as Sarah's killer had been held accountable. Later, Liam received a lengthy prison sentence. The case was officially solved. But for Sarah's family, the verdict was only part of the story. Because unlike many murder cases, this one still lacked something essential: Sarah herself. To this day, her remains have never been recovered. Somewhere, the final piece of the mystery remains hidden. And for those who loved her, that absence continues to matter. The conviction answered many questions. It explained what happened. It identified who was responsible. But it could not provide the closure that comes from bringing a loved one home. That is what makes Sarah Stern's case so heartbreaking. Not simply the crime itself, but the betrayal behind it. A young woman placed her trust in people she believed were friends. She had no reason to fear them, no reason to think that an ordinary meeting would become the final chapter of her life. Yet according to prosecutors, greed transformed friendship into something far darker. A rumor about hidden money became an obsession. That obsession became a plan. And that plan ended with a young woman disappearing forever. Today, Sarah Stern is remembered not because of the crime committed against her, but because of the life she should have been allowed to live. A life filled with possibilities. A future that was never given the chance to unfold. And although justice was ultimately served in court, one hope remains: that someday, somehow, Sarah will finally be found. Because even after a conviction, even after the headlines fade, there are families still waiting for one final answer. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing to BrightDawn's True Crime. And if there's one lesson to take away from Sarah's case, it's this: the most dangerous person in a story isn't always a stranger. Sometimes it's the person standing right beside you. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe.